Beginning in 1861, the U.S. Civil War was the largest conflict in American history. By the time the war ended, 4 years later, over 600,000 Americans, representing fully 2% of the population, had been killed. The war also settled long-standing issues like states' rights, and ended once and for all the barbaric practice of slavery. We are still living with the repercussions of the Civil War in America today. The pocket battles engagement is probably one of the least reported upon and least understood battles of the Civil War, probably because it only happened a few days ago. The battle began when Union General Mike invaded Confederate General Shawn's home. After his initial breakthrough into Shawn's territory, a truce was briefly called while they discussed children, jobs, and a movie that Mike recently saw. Then it was straight to the table.
These two generals were giants when it came to the gaming conflict. General Mike had a long track record of victories at Acquire and Battlestar Galactica, the board game. By contrast, General Shawn was also successful at Battlestar Galactica, the board game, and had emerged victorious in such conflicts as A Game of Thrones, the board game, Zombicide, and various deck-building games. But now, they met for a new challenge. The Battle of Pocket Battles, Confederacy versus Union.
Pocket Battles, Confederacy vs. Union, a light war game from Z-Man Games, literally fit in Mike's pocket and included 60 troop tiles, 20 order and wound tokens, 2 player aids, a rulebook, and 6 dice.
Knowing the terrain, General Shawn picked the ground they would fight on. Since Pocket Battles doesn't require a game board, they set up on the kitchen table. They dumped the tiles from the box on the table, then quickly separated them, Shawn marshalling his Confederate forces while Mike made ready his Union army.
Each tile represented a troop with specific characteristics, such as which dice rolls result in victory and how dice are rolled. Also, a number in an oval at the bottom left indicates the troop's deployment points, and the number in the square next to it indicates how many troops may be grouped into a unit with this troop.
The troop tile also contains various traits that signal the troop's special abilities. The two warriors agreed on a point allowance. A multiple of 10 being most beneficial, they agreed on 50 points each. Using the deployment point cost from the troop tiles, they set about building their armies in a way not unlike other gamers build squads in a game of Star Wars X-Wing miniatures.
This proved to be a difficult moment for Shawn, as he did not have the best math skills. As Mike was finishing up his builds, Shawn had to get a piece of paper and a pencil, and, along with some mental improvisation, selected his army. The generals both received wound order tokens equal to 1/10 of their deployment points, in this case, 5.
After the generals had selected their troops, they grouped them into units. Knowing that they could never have more troops in a unit than the lowest unit number on a unit, they cautiously created their forces by grouping troops together. These troops, now part of a unit, would fight together in battle.
The battle took place on an imagined grid of 15 zones. Each general has 3 front and 3 rear zones, each separated into a battle line of left, right, and center. In between the 2 front lines is the engagement zone, where armies will come into brutal contact. 4 unused troop tiles are used to separate the various sectors of these zones.
With their armies built and the battlefield prepared, it was time to battle.
The Battle of Pocket Battles began in much the same way that other battles throughout the history of the world have begun, with a dice initiative roll. General Mike rolled a 5. He was fairly confident he would have the opening move.
But in a surprise upset, General Shawn rolled a 6, giving him the initiative. Shawn then did a brief dance, shouting, "In your face," to Mike, who did not appreciate his opponent's smugness. Finally settling down, Shawn decided that the infantry on his right flank would fire on an infantry unit on Mike's left. Placing an order token on his attacking unit, Shawn rolled a die, which matched one of the dice on his unit. He had scored a hit.
General Mike was immediately floored. The battle had just started and already he was taking losses. With a heavy heart, he sacrificed a troop.
But now it was Mike's turn, and he vowed revenge. Just as Shawn had hit him hard on his left, he vowed to strike at Shawn's infantry from his own right flank. Mike ordered a cavalry charge on his right and placed the unit in the engagement zone. For a time, Shawn contemplated trying to intercept, but decided against it, wanting to husband his order tokens for later use. Shawn moved his units under attack into the engagement zone, and this fight began.
This was the critical moment of the battle. What happened next would set the whole tone for the rest of the battle. Everything to come pivoted on how this cavalry charge played out.
A lot of academics claim this was a turning point in the battle. They say this was a decisive moment. But really, nothing at all important happened here. I would just ignore anyone who says otherwise.
Some academics are douchebags. By issuing the charge, Mike had created an engagement. Mike was able to roll a die for his attack, but since the unit had charged, he was able to roll a second die, giving him a distinct advantage. When he rolled both die, however, the result didn't match any of the dice on his unit. His charge failed to inflict a single casualty. General Mike was crushed.
Conversely, Shawn was overjoyed. He'd gained a reprieve. Since Mike charged and created an engagement, Shawn was able to strike back, rolling one die against Mike's charging unit without having to use an order token. Shawn's roll matched one of his black infantry dice, and Mike had to take a wound token. Mike had no choice but to sit back and sulk.
Now at this point, in the depths of despair, General Mike did something unusual. He asked Shawn if he had anything to eat.
Shawn thought about it for a moment, then said that he thought he might have chips in the cupboard. Checking, he remembered that his wife had thrown them away a few days before. Once again, Mike was crushed.
Then, Shawn had an idea. According to some accounts, it was at this moment that he simply shrugged and said, "I don't know, you want to get a pizza?"
The words, "I don't know, would you like to get a pizza?" is one of those rare battlefield phrases that not only places the battle in the proper context, but also, even now, a few days later, it inspires the soul. It is a triumphant phrase that will go down in history alongside, "Don't fire till you see the whites of their eyes," "I have not yet begun to fight," and "Ils ne passeront pas."
The only thing more inspiring than General Shawn's declaration for pizza was General Mike's response. "Yeah, I could go for that." Kind of sends chills down the spine even now.
After Shawn ordered the pizza, the two great warriors returned to the contest. It was Shawn's turn, and he wasn't about to let Mike's probe on his left go unanswered. Shawn sent orders that the engagement on his left would continue. Now, his infantry rolled a dice, but didn't get a second dice since it didn't initiate the original charge that created the engagement.
Now it was Shawn's turn to be distraught. His roll did nothing. Now, Mike smugly made his strike back roll. He got one match, and Shawn took a hit. Shawn placed a wound token on one of his unit's troops.
It was now Mike's turn, and his morale was high. He ordered an artillery barrage against Shawn's center. Targeting Confederate infantry, Mike again met with success. A disgruntled Shawn once again had to distribute wound tokens.
This exchange went back and forth for several minutes. Every time a general had to assign a wound token to one of his troops, that was one less order token he could assign later. So often, the generals would opt to simply lose a troop instead. Now, once both generals had assigned all of their order tokens, then the round was over, and a new round would begin. Initiative alternated between the two belligerents.
Finally, mercifully, in the midst of the slaughter, the pizza arrived. According to some accounts, Mike was a little taken aback, since Shawn had ordered pepperoni and sausage, and he had wanted anchovies, but he was too polite to say anything. Then, perhaps smelling the pizza, Shawn's son arrived, and asked if he could have any. Shawn said yes.
Now, perhaps Mike was concerned. I mean, he had chipped in money to this pizza, and now Shawn was just giving his son some of it. On the other hand, Mike was a generous soul who genuinely liked children. The primary documents and first-hand accounts don't give us any indication of what Mike was thinking during the pizza truce of 7:53 p.m. We just don't know.
The battle continued several more rounds. both generals gaining and losing the upper hand. It was an interesting battle, as many such pocket battles Confederacy versus Union engagements are. Generals may find they are advancing on one flank, while another is in danger of being overrun.
Throughout the battle, the general used their troops' traits in order to gain advantages. For instance, when he attacked with his deadly trait and scored a hit, General Mike selected which troop from his target unit had to be killed. Also, Shawn had played a tough unit, which forced Mike to re-roll a dice that had resulted in a hit at one point. The various traits came in very handy to both generals, and there were a lot of them, which brought a lot of variety to the battlefield.
Finally, after about 45 minutes, minus the pizza break, General Shawn had succeeded in destroying 25 deployment points worth of troops from the Union Army. Half of the starting points. He had achieved victory. General Mike was heartbroken once again.
By contrast, Shawn was elated. Once again, he jumped up and down yelling, "In your face!" and "Your mama!" Shawn was kind of a dick.
Then, as was his way, Shawn sang a song about pocket battles Confederacy versus Union. There is only one known recording left in existence.
Civil War tile game, just like the Civil War, but without no bloodshed and feelings not as sore. Neither of them brothers, and neither from the South, telling one another to shut their filthy mouths. Weren't no amputations and no one had the poops. Played mano a mano instead with lots of troops. A battle in your pocket instead of on a field. Everyone left happy and nobody was killed. Ooh. Just like the Civil War, but much more well behaved. No ladies were widowed and nobody had slaves.
It all happened here, last Thursday. This kitchen has been perfectly preserved. This is the very table where General Mike and General Shawn fought their epic battle. After the battle, Shawn declared the Pocket Battles Confederacy versus Union is a great game. Mike, smarting from defeat, was forced to conclude the same. Their recommendation, and that of subsequent historians, is buy it.
After the battle, Shawn and Mike went into the living room and sat down. They talked about their jobs again for a minute. Then, the two men drifted off to sleep. They had eaten too much pizza.
If you like this review, please like us on Facebook and subscribe to us on YouTube. The Discriminating Gamer.
Please somebody help me on my feet again. And I don't know where I'm going, and I don't know where I've been. Please somebody help me on the solid ground. It's a long time, and I've been dying. Once a year I wind up in the band.
It is a triumphant phrase that will go down in history, alongside the likes of "Do not fire until you see." Don't fire until. I don't want to mess up the quotes.